This video demonstrates the user interface of the heart rate coherence application, showing you how to use the controls to configure the feedback to your preference. Audio feedback, including the use of the threshold, is covered in another video. The application has two windows. This is the main window, and this is the support window. The support window is only used to check on heartbeat and breath detection. We'll cover the interface in 4 parts. Firstly, we'll look at the short-term displays, then the long-term display, then the spectral analysis display, and finally the support window and breathing calibration. These are the short-term displays. There are 2 charts which are always synchronized. The upper chart shows the variation of heart rate in red and the breath in green. The lower chart shows coherence score in yellow and in magenta synchrony. The scales of each of these 4 parameters are independently controlled. You can click on the colored squares to select which scale is to be displayed on the axis. The breath trace is a little different. It's a relativized measure that's automatically scaled to fit the chart, so you can't manually change its scale. There are 5 controls positioned below the charts here. The first one sets the length of time it takes for the traces to traverse the whole chart from right to left, or in other words the horizontal scale. So you can make the traces run faster or slower. The second control sets the vertical scale for the red heart rate trace, or in other words the difference between the upper and lower limits of the chart. The third sets the actual lower limit for the heart rate trace. You can use this to shift the whole trace higher or lower while keeping the same scale. If you don't see the red trace at all, it may be because it's either above the displayed range or below it. Check this numeric display first to make sure you're picking up the heartbeat properly, and then adjust either or both of these controls as needed. Neither of these 2 controls affects the display of the green breath trace, even though it's in the same chart. This control sets the vertical scale for the yellow coherence score in the lower chart. The bottom limit is always 0. When you're new to heart rate coherence training, you should probably set it to something lower so that you get more sensitivity. You can increase it later if the trace goes off the top of the chart. The last control sets the vertical scale for the magenta synchrony trace. This central line is 0 on the synchrony scale. For optimal coherence, you want the trace to be as close as possible to 0. When the trace is above the 0 line, it means the breath is leading the heart wave, and vice versa if it's below the line. This is the long-term display, showing coherence score in yellow, synchrony in magenta, and breathing rate in blue. As with the short-term display, the scale of each parameter is independent, and you can click on the colored squares here at the top to select which scale is displayed on the axis. This time it's a slightly different version of synchrony. It's been averaged over a few breaths, and the sign has been dropped. That's because when you average something that's sometimes positive and sometimes negative, the average will be around 0, but that doesn't really tell you much. There are 4 controls below the chart here. The first one sets the length of time it takes for the trace to traverse the whole chart from right to left, or in other words the horizontal range. The second one sets the vertical scale for the coherence score trace. As with the short-term display, the bottom of the chart is always 0. The next control sets the scale for the synchrony trace. And the last one sets the scale for breathing rate. This chart shows the results of spectral analysis of the heart wave data. Remember, spectral analysis is another method of assessing coherence. Its explanation is quite technical, and it's covered in the application's user guide. Don't worry if you don't fully understand it, as it's not a very important part of the application. The basic idea is that spectral analysis, also known as Fourier analysis, looks for rhythms of different frequency within the heart wave. The horizontal axis is frequency. When you're in good coherence, there's only one rhythm, whose frequency is the same as the breathing rate. It shows as a single well-defined peak in the chart, in the green area here. The vertical scale of the chart is set automatically. There's only one control associated with the spectral analysis display, and it selects the number of heartbeats that the analysis is computed over. So a higher number represents a longer time period, and the graph is more of an averaged picture. The support window shows you the raw signals from which heart rate and breathing rate and so on are derived. On the left side is breathing data, and on the right, heart rate data. The system needs to calibrate to your breath. This happens automatically during the first 20 seconds after you press play. During this time, the breath trace in the short-term chart doesn't display properly. You need to breathe evenly and naturally through the nose, not too slowly. If, after this time, the breath trace still doesn't look right, or you get spurious numbers for your breathing rate, then it probably means the system miscalibrated. To correct this, you can either press stop and then start again, or there's a button in the support window here that you press after a short period of even and natural breathing. The key to reliable breath measurement is detection of the breath's turning points, or the beginnings of the inhalation and exhalation. This chart shows you what well-calibrated breathing looks like. These two dotted yellow lines should be positioned something like this. Neither is too close to the center of the graph or to the outer points. Once the breath is calibrated, it's generally very stable and reliable, and you don't need to make further reference to the support window. On the right-hand side is heart rate data. The top chart shows the ECG. Heartbeats are detected when these sharp spikes cross the dotted yellow line. You can use these charts to make sure that your sensors are picking up a clean signal. See the application user guide and the hardware setup guide for more details.